All right, thanks everyone. I'm excited today to talk about dairy farming and a little bit on the life cycle of how a cow goes from being a calf to producing milk for you, and then how that milk gets from the cow to you. I'm Jeremy Daubert. I'm the dairy extension agent in Rockingham County, and everything I do is about dairy with my job, and I'm really excited about it and excited to talk to you about it. And like Dylan said, feel free to ask questions along the way, and I'll try to answer them. So I'm going to start at the beginning. So a calf is born. So this is Cadence here. She was born 10 days ago with my sons kind of getting her in the pasture. So with about an hour after a calf is born, they can stand. So they really kind of get at it really quickly. They're wobbly to start with, but they're, it doesn't take very long for their muscles to strengthen up and they can walk around pretty quickly. An interesting fact is bovine calves, either beef or dairy, are born with no immunity. They have no immunity innately from their dams in utero, so they have to get that immunity after they're born. So they get this by getting colostrum. So a calf weighs between 70 and 120 pounds at birth, and then they grow from there. They also have a simple stomach when they're born. So similar to humans, so they need really high quality proteins to start. We'll talk a little bit about how their stomachs develop over time to be able to digest different foods. But when they're born, their stomachs are really very similar to humans, which is why they can digest milk and use it for growth at a very young age. So again, the calf is born with no immunity. So it's really important that these calves get colostrum. So colostrum is the first milk out of the cow after she gives birth. This colostrum is really high in protein. It's really high in what we call IgGs, which is what the calf can absorb to give it the passive immunity that it needs. So calves need colostrum within 3 hours of birth. Every hour after birth, their stomachs are unable to absorb a little less of these immunity immunoglobulins. So typically we'll take the calf and we'll milk the cow and manually feed it colostrum. Here I'm feeding this calf a few hours after she's born. She's drinking on the bottle by herself. She's suckling by herself. I'm just holding this bottle, and it may look like I'm sitting on this calf, but I am not sitting on the calf. The calf is not hurt. She's happily drinking this milk. It's just easier to squat over to the calf and hold the bottle that direction and get it to drink really well. We typically feed them between 2 quarts and a gallon immediately, and then within 12 hours, we'll feed them another gallon of this colostrum so that they get a healthy start to life. And again, this passive immunity comes from maternal antibodies in the colostrum. So we also, to get them off to a healthy start, have to do a few other things to these calves. As you can see in the picture on the left, we give them a vaccine. Just so they don't get any pneumonia. This is actually sprayed in their nose, so we're not giving them a shot, but they're spraying it in their nose, and this prevents them from getting a few viruses that cause pneumonia. We'll give them the other syringe there. It's got some blue stuff in it, some vitamins. We'll give them some vitamins. This helps strengthen their muscles early in life and just really helps them get off to a quick start. In the picture on the right, you'll see I have circled there in blue the calf's navel. So the calf's navel, we don't have to cut it. It tears when the calf is being born, but that's like an open wound kind of. So we put an iodine solution on there to dry that navel up, just like human babies. We put this solution on there. In a few days, this dries up and it prevents any infections from getting into the animal. So calves are, like I said, not born with any innate immunity. So we have to do these things to keep them from getting sick. So any bacteria that could get into the calf would have to go through the nose, the mouth, or the navel. So we give the vaccine in the nose, we spray the navel to dry it off, and we give them colostrum through the mouth. So those are the 3 ways that we prevent them from getting sick early in life. So the first 2 to 3 months of a calf's life, many farms use what you see on the left here we call calf hutches. This calf hutch is about 64 square foot. Research shows a calf needs 30 to 35 square foot, so we're almost double the size that the calf needs to live in, and that gives them a really healthy environment to grow for the first 2 to 3 months. These are babies. They're treated like babies. They're fed a specific ration every day. They're fed at the same time every day. They start out with milk. They get only milk for a week, and then we'll gradually mix in fresh water daily and calf grain. So most farms use individual housing. There are some farms that are using group housing. There are some benefits to the group housing, but it's a little bit harder to keep them healthy in this group housing, which is why so many farms use individual housing. Straw bedding is used to keep animals dry and clean. It's very important to keep them dry and have fresh air all the time. In the winter, most farms use blankets on their calves. The blankets will keep them warm and keep them from losing a lot of body heat. Fresh air is really important to these calves. So these hutches are designed that they ventilate very well. You can see the top of them has a vent in it, and fresh air can come in through the back, through the front, through the side. They have fresh water and feed daily, and calves will drink up to 1 gallon of milk per feeding twice a day, so 2 gallons of milk a day, but they'll also start drinking water in the first week and start eating little bits of grain throughout their life. So once we get them to 3 months of age, 2 to 3 months of age, we'll wean them. So they'll go from drinking all milk to eating all grain and forages from the 0 to 3 months of age. In that time, the rumen starts to develop. So the rumen is what their mature stomach will be. When they're weaned, they'll go into group pens, like you see on the side, to help with socialization. We'll transition them. We'll start to develop their stomach so that they can more readily digest things that aren't digestible for most other animals, like hay, grass, and other forages. We slowly start grouping them in smaller groups. So many farms go from an individual to 2, and then maybe to 6 or 7 before they go into larger groups. And during this time, there really is the focus on keeping them healthy and keeping them growing. So a cow will gain between 2 to 3 pounds a day during this period. So they grow very rapidly from 3 to 14 months. So once they get into the 13 to 15 month range, we're going to get ready to breed them so they can have their own calf. So again, these calves are gaining 2 to 3 pounds a day. So they're going to go from 70 to 80 pounds to 750 to 800 pounds within the first year. So they grow really quickly, and they're getting them ready for their career. So these are dairy cows. Their career is to make milk for their calves and milk for you and me. So they have a 9-month gestation. It's exactly to the day the same as a human gestation. And gestation is the amount of time that the pregnancy is, and they'll carry a calf. So during this time, from 14 to 24 months, they'll get some vaccines to keep them healthy and their impending calf to be healthy. And again, we want to keep a consistent growth throughout their lifetime. Once they get pregnant, their needs for protein have been reduced, so we can really change their ration to almost entirely forage-based and away from a grain-based diet as earlier in life. So around 24 months of age, a cow has their first calf. So they have to have a calf to give milk. So a calf will drink, like we talked about 2 gallons of milk per day. For around 60 days, there's 120 gallons that the calf will drink. So I get asked often, well, doesn't the calf need all the milk that the cow will produce? Well, I did a few calculations, and the average cow will produce about 3,450 gallons of milk per year. So this is way more than what the calf will drink. So we do feed this calf the milk from the cow, but we also have much more milk for humans to consume. So now we'll talk a little bit about how milk goes from the cow to you. So from farm to fridge. This is just a little example here, and we'll go through all the different pieces along the way. So dairy farming is a family affair. Just some pictures here of different members of a family working on the farm, working with the animals. There's around 30,000 dairy farms in the US right now. This is down from nearly 200,000 only 20 years ago. So we've lost a lot of dairy farms, but the number of dairy cows has remained relatively steady. In Virginia, we have just over 400 dairy farms left in the state of Virginia. There are about 9.3 million dairy cows in the US, with 75,000 of them living in Virginia. The average farm in the US is around 300 cows per farm. In Virginia, it's slightly lower than that at about 260 cows per farm. And as I said, this is a family affair. So 97% of dairy farms today are still family owned. Many people think that the larger the farm gets, they all of a sudden become corporate farms or factory farms. But as is actually the case, 97% of all dairy farms are actually family owned and managed. So we'll talk a little bit about some cow chow. I mentioned the rumen earlier. That might be a new term to many of you. So the rumen is the main part of the mature cow's stomach. It can be as big as a 55-gallon drum and can hold up to a bathtub full of water. So a rumen is also referred to as a fermentation vat. So if anybody has ever had things like sauerkraut or any other fermented foods, this cow's stomach actually takes forages and roughages that are not consumable by humans and ferments it in there. There's microbial bugs in the rumen that break it down into smaller volatile fatty acids and amino acids that can be used by the cow for growth, for maintenance, and for milk production. So the rumen is really the amazing thing that makes cows able to digest things that humans cannot digest. So a cow can drink up to 50 gallons of water per day. They'll drink a little bit more in hot weather than they will in cooler weather. And again, this is about a bathtub worth of water a day. In addition, they'll eat up to 100 pounds of food daily. So what does a cow eat? Cows' diets primarily are forage based. So grass, hay, grain, byproducts. A lot of byproducts of the foods you eat get fed back to cows. So you drink orange juice, that pulp that's left and the peel that humans don't eat gets fed to cows. The cotton for your clothes, cotton seeds that are left over from that process gets fed to cows. Brewers' grains and distillers from ethanol and breweries gets fed back to cows. This is all stuff that humans cannot eat or digest very well. So these cows take these products that would otherwise have to go to a landfill, and they use them to make a healthy and nutritious product for you and me to drink. So how are they milked? So by hand? Well, not very many cows are milked by hand today. Back in the 1800s, that's primarily how cows were milked. So the automatic milking machine was developed in 1922. So almost 100 years ago, it was developed. About that time, farms started transitioning from only having 3 or 4 or 5 cows that they can milk for each family, up to 20 or 30 cows that they can milk with an automatic milking machine, sort of similar to the one you see in the second picture from the left at the bottom here. So they're vacuum based. So a vacuum pump puts vacuum into the milker, and then a pulsation actually squeezes a rubber or silicone inflation to extract the milk from the cow. So the next picture, the third one from the left, is a typical dairy milking parlor that you will see on farms today. These milking parlors were developed in the 60s, so 50, 60 years ago. They were developed. They've been adding technology over the years, but the concept was developed 60 years ago. And many farms still use this type of system today. The next picture is a picture of a robotic milker. Robotic milkers were developed in the mid-90s in Europe and came to the US in the year 2000. The first robotic milker came to the US in Wisconsin in the year 2000. So 20 years ago this year, we've had robotic milkers in the US. Today, about 10% of dairies use robotic technology for milking their cows. So here's just some pictures of some different places where they're milked. So we'll start with the top left-hand picture. So a side opening parlor. So this is a type of parlor that was very common in Virginia in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. Cows could come in individual stalls. They were broad-sided. They were really good for managing cows, but the parlors got really long and it wasn't really good for the workers. So the people that were milking had lots of steps to get in to go from one cow to the next because these cows were taking up so much space in the parlor. So they could come in, get milked, and go back out, and the next cow would come in. The next one to the right of that, in the middle, the tie stall, is a common system used up in northern states. Wisconsin, New York, Pennsylvania still has many tie stalls today where the cow is actually in a stall and they bring the milker to the cow to get milked. You don't see it as much here in Virginia as most people have parlors, but in the north where it gets cold in the winter, they like to have barns where the cows are inside in the winter and the temperature can be regulated to keep the cows at a constant, comfortable temperature all the time. We'll go to the next picture of the parallel parlor with the blue hoses you see there. So this is a very common parlor. You milk between the back legs. So a cow comes in, takes a 90-degree turn, and then stands there and you milk between the back legs. This is very efficient because the cows are close together, and it's very nice for workers because they don't have near as many steps to milk the cows, especially as compared to the side opening parlors. All the way on the right, you'll see two different types of parlors. A rotary parlor, which is just that. It's like a big carousel. So cows actually walk on and the carousel goes around and the cows walk on one spot, the milker goes on, and when they get to all the way back around, they back off this carousel and they're done being milked. So there's probably about 10 to 12% of farms in the United States have this type of parlor. Below that is the herringbone parlor. As parlors progressed through the years, they went from side opening to herringbone, which again was less steps for the worker, and still you could see the side of the cow. And most of these parlors you milked actually in front of the back legs, which is different from the parallel where you milk between the back legs. And then all the way, we'll go back over to the picture with the robot on the left is the robotic milking. And like we said in the last slide, robots started in the year 2000 in the United States. So there's a lot of interest in robotic milking. This saves on labor. It also gives the cows the freedom to come and go as they please. So these robotic milkers are in operation 24 hours a day. A cow can come, she can get some grain, get milked whenever she wants. So there's a lot of research being done on robotic milkers and how they work in cow comfort and how they collect information. So with a lot of things going on, we expect to see more robotic technology on farms in the future. So some milking procedures. So farms have strict protocols to keep milk clean and safe. Another interesting fact is no hands ever touch milk from the cow to you. It's probably the only food product that never gets touched by human hands. Once that milker goes on the cow, the milk will go through a pipeline to a cooling tank, and then it'll go on the truck to the processing plant in a bottle and never gets touched by human hands. This is one of the ways that we keep milk safe and free from any contaminants for you. So the teats are clean and sanitized before milker goes on. The milk is checked to make sure that there is no off colors or chunks in the milk and that the cow is healthy. A clean milking machine is attached, and then the milk goes to a cooling tank to cool to below 40 degrees. This is very important as milk is very nutritious. So milk has to get cooled to below 40 degrees to keep any bacteria from growing in it. Again, farms have very strict protocols. Every farm has a set protocol for their farm and a standard operating procedure that everybody that milks on it, whether it be a family member or an employee, knows exactly how the milking is done. Cows love consistency. So they don't want to go to the beach on vacation this week. They want to do the exact same thing that they did yesterday and the same thing tomorrow. They really love consistency. So these protocols really ensure that farms can do everything consistent for these animals. Next, it goes to the bottling plant. So before it leaves the farm, the milk must be cold. So the truck driver that loads the milk onto the truck checks the temperature of the milk. The milk is tested for antibiotics on the farm. If it is not cold, or it tests positive for antibiotics, or it has anything visibly wrong with it. So if there's ice in the milk tank, if there's chunks in there, if there's dirt in there, if anything just looks not right, this milk will not get loaded on the truck and go to the dairy plant. So this gets checked before it leaves the farm. It will be checked again after it's loaded on the truck and before it's unloaded at the plant. Milk is checked very often to make sure that it is safe for you to drink. Once it goes to the bottling plant, it gets pasteurized to kill bacteria. And you'll see this little chart on the right. There's different temperatures and times for pasteurization. You may hear the term vat or batch pasteurization, and this is a lower temperature for a longer time. So many smaller processors will use this to process their milk. HTST is high temperature short time pasteurization, and you'll see the different temperatures and the different amount of time. Depending on the facilities, use different protocols to pasteurize the milk. This makes sure that there's no bad bacteria in milk and that it is safe for you to drink. It is homogenized to make fat molecules consistent and smaller. Standardized fat levels for what goes in the bottle. So for instance, whole milk has 3.25% fat. 2% is just as it says, 2% fat. So all the milk in the bottle is standardized to make sure that it has the correct amount of fat. Vitamin D is added, and vitamin A is added for skim milk only. Whole milk doesn't need vitamin A added because it already has it in there. And the vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin. So the whole milk and the fat in the milk actually really helps that mobilize in the human body after it's consumed. If it's not getting bottled and put into fluid milk, it goes to further processing after it's pasteurized to be made into cheese, sour cream, butter, ice cream, cream cheese, yogurt, eggnog. It can be dried for powdered milk, condensed for condensed, evaporated milk. There's lots of different products that milk is used for. So what's your favorite product? I think everybody has their favorite product. So I have a hard time choosing between cheese and ice cream myself. So then it goes to you. From the farm to you in about 48 hours. So the amazing thing, it goes from the cow to the store shelf where you can buy it within 48 hours. It never touches a human hand and is very safe. It's moved on a refrigerated truck. The milk, when it shows up at stores, has to be below 45 degrees or the store will not accept it, and it has to be put into a different place. Is kept cold the entire time. And again, this is for everyone's safety. Milk is very nutritious for people and animals. It's also nutritious for bacteria. So keeping it cold keeps the milk safe for you. So have you ever wondered where your milk comes from when you buy that bottle of milk? So every bottle of milk and dairy product has a code on it. So you can go to where'smymilkfrom.com, type in the dairy code as is circled here. So this bottle here is 26-875. It will always be 2 numbers, and then it could be followed by 2, 3, or 4 numbers, or possibly even some letters. But the first 2 will always be 2 numbers and then a dash. So this one here, 26-875, is Michigan Dairy LLC in Livonia, Michigan. You can also look up all the products that dairy makes. If you want it from Virginia, Virginia code is code 51. Now this will only tell you where the milk was bottled at and what plant. It doesn't necessarily tell you which farm it comes from. But since milk is a high weight, high fluid product, it usually doesn't get shipped too far. So milk is shipped regionally before it gets processed, But if it's processed in Virginia, you can be assured that it comes relatively close to the area. So why real dairy milk? Milk provides 3 of 4 of the most deficient nutrients in today's diets: calcium, potassium, and vitamin D. The 4th one would be fiber. So if you put your milk on a high fiber cereal, you're getting all 4 in one nutritious meal. There's no dairy impersonators that can claim this, and they can't claim it naturally either. So just a few things. So what does dairy and dairy farms contribute to the economy? So studies show a dairy cow can contribute more than $13,000 per year to the local economy. Dairy farms in Virginia contribute over $3 billion to the local economy. Again, this is really important as it's really contributed locally to the feed stores, the hardware stores, the banks. All this money stays locally in local communities. The environmental impact: 80% of what dairy cows consume is not able to be consumed by humans. So they're not taking food away from people. They're eating stuff that people can't eat. Many of them are also on land that cannot be used to grow human food. Dairy contributes just 2% of U.S. greenhouse gases to all the greenhouse gases produced in the U.S. U.S. dairy has reduced its carbon footprint by 25% in the last 20 years and has a goal as an industry of being carbon neutral by 2050. And we're well on our way to meeting that goal. And of course, they produce organic fertilizer that can be used to fertilize many things and keep the soil healthy and grow healthy crops. So if there's no questions, I think we'll move on to Cathy in her presentation.
Thank you, Jeremy. Good afternoon. We're going to cover some of the health benefits of consuming dairy products before we actually get into the recipe. As most of us know, fluid milk products and foods are part of the dairy group. The USDA's MyPlate makes recommendations for adults and youth ages 9 and above of 3 cups of milk or dairy foods daily. This fluctuates some for younger children. Those ages 4 to 8 should consume 2.5 servings, while younger children 2 to 3 years of age consume 2 servings. Our dairy foods and products, milks included, provide many nutrients to our diets that are super important. As you can see, we've got a list here of most of the major ones, but I was really going to just highlight a couple of the more important ones. In particular, calcium. This is used for building bones and teeth and maintaining our bone mass. Calcium is definitely linked to improved bone health, which can include osteoporosis improvements. Potassium aids in maintaining a healthy blood pressure, while vitamin D functions in the body to maintain proper levels of calcium as well as phosphorus. These also help to build and maintain our bones. We're ready to put our featured dairy recipe together now. I decided to pick the chocolate chia pudding just because it's different. I hadn't used chia seeds in this manner before, and I was curious to see how they would work, honestly. But it also is a great way to feature milk. We use a whole cup of milk and you get 2 servings. It's healthy, it's easy to fix, and the kids can help if you'd like. It just doesn't take a lot at all. So I'm going to show you now all the ingredients and we'll get started. But for our pudding today, all we need is a mixing bowl, which I chose to use a stainless steel bowl here. We'll need a whisk. We are going to put 1 cup of 1% milk, but I don't think it matters if you choose to use something different. And we're going to add our cocoa powder, 1 tablespoon of cocoa powder, and our chia seeds. The recipe actually calls for 3 tablespoons, but I found that it set better with an extra tablespoon in there. And so I did do 4 tablespoons. Then it calls for a teaspoon or a half teaspoon of vanilla extract, 4 teaspoons of honey, which I always recommend trying to use a local beekeeper's honey just to get that local, support our local business folk. And the last thing is just a pinch of salt. So there you go. So all we're going to do now is we're going to whisk it and make sure that we get everything blended together real well. Hopefully you can see that. You want to make sure with the cocoa powder, it has a tendency to kind of clump, and so you do want to make sure you get all of that smoothed out. So just a little stirring here with our whisk. Now those chia seeds are going to kind of tend to go to the bottom of the bowl. So when we are placing this in our serving cups, we are going to make sure that we get all of those out too. So it looks like our pudding is stirred pretty well. Everything has kind of come together. As you can see, some of the chia seed are on the edge of the pan of our bowl, and so I am going to just get my spatula and make sure that we clean all of that off the edge, and that gets into our pudding glass. Now you can put all of this into a bowl and put it in the refrigerator and then spoon it into cups later. I think I'm going to just try and spoon them into our individual cups now, and that'll save us a step later. But basically I'm gonna pour it into my cups, and I thought these clear glass cups would show it off nicely. Hopefully it's going to turn out just as delicious as it looks. Now the chia seeds are going to absorb the moisture from the milk, and that's what's going to give it more of our typical pudding consistency. They almost form a gel to when they absorb the moisture and plump up. And so then that liquid of the milk kind of dissipates. So there we go. Pretty good. Now before I put them in the refrigerator though, I'm going to give them a little stir just to make sure those seeds are throughout the pudding. And I will do this, I recommend covering it with a little plastic wrap and putting it in the refrigerator. The recipe calls for 3 hours in the refrigerator, but I found keeping them in the refrigerator overnight did a little better. Berries are a great topping for your pudding. It's important to wash your hands with hot soapy water for 20 seconds before and after handling fresh fruit. Washing berries reduces the bacteria that may be present. Put your strawberries in a clean colander and spray them gently. Hey, our pudding's done. It was in the refrigerator overnight. I wanted to show you the thickness of it. It's very thick, as you can see. Now we're going to, like I mentioned, we cut the strawberries up and we're going to add a few of those just as a little decorative item. And I had some slivered almonds I thought would look nice in there, so we've added those. And we are done. So we have a healthy, dairy-filled chia chocolate pudding dessert. Enjoy. Here's a close-up of the pudding. If you haven't used chia seeds in pudding, it's a great addition. I also use those with smoothies using yogurt, which is another of our wonderful dairy products. I think we're going to move on to our questions now. I don't know if we have any.
Yeah. So right now we have not had any questions that have come in from our attendees today, but if you do have any questions either about the production side of dairy or on our recipe, you can feel free to drop those in the Q&A box now. So we will see. There is a question about, does beating or freezing milk affect the nutrients in it? So I think that might be for you, Jeremy.
Hey, Jeremy, does freezing the milk affect the nutritional value?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute.
He's muted. I thought he was.
Oh man, can you see the screen again?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Maybe. There we go. So freezing does not affect the nutrients of the milk, and it's still just as safe, just as healthy. You can freeze it for, they say, up to a year. I mean, hey, if it's frozen, it should be pretty stable for a long time. It will possibly sometimes separate a little bit. The fat molecules in it will separate after it freezes. So it's more of a consistency issue. I know when we've frozen milk in the past, we've used that milk for baking rather than drinking it, just because I don't really like the consistency of it, but that's just my personal preference. But it is safe. It's still got the same nutrients in it. So as far as that goes, there's nothing health-wise wrong with it.
Oh, they said they meant heating it. So would heating it up. Well, they said freezing as well, but would heating it up have any kind of difference with the nutrients as well?
Mm-mm. No, so all the milk you buy in the store is pasteurized. So that's what they do. They heat it to make sure it's safe. So it can break down a few of the enzymes that are in there. It doesn't have any effect on the protein. But there's no data that says it has any nutritional difference heating the milk. So if you want to heat it at home, that's fine too. I know we have a cow in our backyard. We'll take the milk and we'll actually pasteurize it in the kitchen before we drink it, just to make sure it's safe for our family. So, it does not affect the nutritional value of milk.
Awesome. We had another question about, well, it was more of a statement, but you might want to speak to it, or about robotic milkers. Robotic machines for milking must be very expensive. Mm-hmm. Maybe the pros or cons of that and why.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said, they've been in the U.S. for about 20 years. The original cost was $400,000 to $500,000 per unit, and one robotic unit can milk 60 cows. Today, that cost has come down to about $175,000 a unit, and it can milk 70 to 75 cows. So, and while that sounds like a lot of money, the lifespan of these machines is at least 10 years. It will save some labor. It also, when you look at the price of a parlor, if you're going to put a parlor in, so a double 10 parlors, going to cost you about $500,000 also. So you can't afford to do both for sure, but just regular milking equipment is also very expensive. So you're just offsetting that cost with a robotic milker with a little bit of cost savings on some labor. Some farms some family farms have been able to go from, say, milking 80 cows with family members and able to expand to 120 cows with robotic milkers and still the same family members. So they've really just made their farm more efficient and found it to be a good financial step for them.
Awesome, thanks. I think we have a few more minutes if there are any other lingering questions that anybody had in regards to our session today.
Okay, and I'll just, if it lets me, the references for today's session are here. I'll leave that up for a little bit, and then we have just one more closing slide after this.
So I can also email out all of these references to everyone who registered for the session today, so you can actually click on the links. But if there are no other questions, there's some information on this slide about where you can find info on future sessions of our Farm to Table program. Our next session is actually tomorrow at 2, and it will be on beef. And then after that, we take a break for the 4th of July weekend, and we'll be back July 10th with a session on herbs. So when you close this session today, you should get a little message asking you to take a quick survey about your experience with today's session. So we'd really appreciate if you took a couple minutes to do that and give us some feedback. But thank you all for attending today, and thank you to our presenters. That was fabulous. Bye, everyone.